Could swearing in Donald Trump as president violate the Constitution? This is one of the most frequently asked legal questions, particularly as we move closer to the possibility of Trump taking the oath of office once again. This question arises because of Trump's alleged involvement in the January 6th insurrection and whether that disqualifies him under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment explicitly states that anyone who has taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution and subsequently engaged in insurrection, or given aid and comfort to insurrectionists, is disqualified from holding any office, federal, state, or local, unless Congress votes to remove that disqualification by a two-thirds majority in both the House and the Senate. Based on the plain language of the Constitution, the logical conclusion is that anyone who engaged in insurrection after swearing to defend the Constitution cannot be sworn into office. If that person is sworn in, then the individual administering the oath could, in theory, be violating their own oath to uphold the Constitution. Not only could it be considered unconstitutional, but it could also be viewed as unethical, immoral, and undemocratic. Swearing in someone who is constitutionally disqualified from holding office undermines the rule of law. To put this in perspective, consider the constitutional requirements for holding the presidency. A person must be at least 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. If someone who is 34 years old or not a natural-born citizen attempted to take the oath of office, the Constitution would bar them from doing so. The same standard applies to those disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, let's examine whether Trump is indeed an insurrectionist based on legal rulings. A judge in California and another trial judge in Colorado both determined that Trump engaged in insurrection. The Colorado Supreme Court upheld this ruling. However, the U.S. Supreme Court later ruled that Colorado could not keep Trump off its presidential primary ballot. This ruling raises important questions about the limits of state authority versus federal authority in determining eligibility for federal office. Importantly, the Supreme Court's decision did not overturn or negate the findings that Trump engaged in insurrection. Instead, it focused on the specific issue of whether a state could exclude him from a primary ballot. The court did not address whether Trump's actions disqualify him from holding office under the 14th Amendment. This distinction matters. Trump remains, in the eyes of multiple courts, an adjudicated insurrectionist. But the Supreme Court sidestepped the broader constitutional question of whether his disqualification applies nationally. This leaves the issue unresolved and potentially open to further litigation. Looking ahead, challenges to Trump's eligibility could arise during the certification of election results in Congress on January 6th or at his swearing-in ceremony on January 20th. If an objection is raised, it could prompt a court review of whether Trump's prior conduct disqualifies him from holding office. Such a case could escalate to the Supreme Court, where the justices might once again be called upon to interpret the 14th Amendment. Despite the constitutional arguments, practical considerations may outweigh legal principles. Some legal analysts speculate that the Supreme Court could rule in Trump's favor, arguing that one state's adjudication cannot dictate national eligibility standards. This pragmatic approach could prioritize political stability over strict constitutional adherence, effectively allowing Trump to serve despite the 14th Amendment's provisions. This scenario highlights a broader tension between what is legally right and what is politically practical. In an ideal system, adherence to constitutional principles would take precedence. However, the reality is that political dynamics, public opinion, and judicial interpretation often shape outcomes in ways that depart from strict constitutional text. For those who value constitutional integrity, this situation underscores the importance of continued advocacy and vigilance. While the courts may ultimately allow Trump to take office, the legal and ethical debates surrounding his eligibility will likely persist, shaping public discourse and future legal battles. In conclusion, the question of whether swearing in Trump violates the Constitution remains unresolved. While the 14th Amendment provides clear guidelines, the Supreme Court's reluctance to address the broader implications leaves room for interpretation. Whether this issue is resolved through litigation, legislation, or political compromise, it serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing struggle to balance constitutional principles with practical governance.